Shirley here with Jupiter point of Tali, and this is now a sole hour of a moon night with the moon in the 11th house in Mercury sign, midheaven ruled by Sol, and Sol is on Deneb Algedi, with Mercury conjoining it, applying to trine Lilith. Okay, Sun is applying to trine Lilith, Mercury separating, Lilith in Libra. Ascendant is ruled by retrograde Mars, and the Sun is releasing from a square to Uranus. So there has been a lot of eurekas, hectic energies, but also revelations. I definitely had spiritual experiences that are quite shocking. And that got me to think about astrology. And so definitely the perspective of being an astrologer, and it always has context. Okay, there's a context to what you do. And so I was thinking about both the shocking realizations, the shocking events, looking at the chart and understanding things about the world, um, and both the good and the challenging of it. And I've gotten to experience them both today. So there are readings I didn't post yet. Um, First of all, the eureka when you find out how something works. I was looking at a chart of NATO, and there is going to be an ingress of an outer planet as Neptune to a very compacted house in NATO's chart. The many things I was able to understand there, both terrifying and fascinating, were a spiritual experience for me. It's a moment in my, I cannot say career in the sense of daytime job, um, but it's a moment in my life path where I am fascinated and experiencing life through the lens of astrology. And it's also understanding, if we talk about, let's say, NATO, had we put Mars, which is, talk about military, in Scorpio, I might not have been surviving. Okay, I was born in 1984, and that's when Pluto ingressed to Scorpio. So if we would go with the stellium in Scorpio with Mars in its home sign Scorpio, I would not have been surviving maybe. Or with Mars in Capricorn, where at that time Neptune was. If we would go with Mars in Capricorn, if it would somehow survive through the Neptune phase, and we would need to put Mars closer to Rahu, then what we will have is 2008, Pluto ingress into Capricorn, which would persist until very recently, where Pluto ingressed into Aquarius. So Mars is at home in Scorpio, is exalted in Capricorn. Those two placements in 1949 for any military organization and operation would have resulted in much too soon, much too big, much too lengthy war on a global scale much too soon. And yet it is a military operation. It means that it does have to have Mars strong enough, and that would be in Aries. This year we're beginning the ingress of Neptune into Aries. Neptune will be in Aries between 2025 to 2039. So thanks to my colleagues. And then in around the 1940s, beginning 1940s, 2040s, we will have Pluto ingressing into Pisces. That means Neptune will activate that Mars of that organization at least up until 2039. So the eureka of finding that out and understanding this has been a moment in my life path or my career that is of legacy moment. It has also been an understanding that post World War II there would be some sort of military alliance, and putting social engineering aside and all that we know, let's give it a name, MK Ultra, let's give it a name, expandable children, let's give it a name, the ritual abuse that goes with the projects of expandable children, let's give it a name, the children that we didn't manage to save are our leaders that operated these organizations and those that fund them. Or dead, of course. This is also a moment where the picture gets even bigger and you understand that from astrological perspective, foundation of NATO was a chart that gave us a little rest. And we can think about the times of Uranus in Aries for a 7-8 year example. And so this is an understanding that while I can absolutely shed the light on things that I would prefer done differently, I also understand that there are things that adapt to the astrology. So that was a moment that is very, very powerful for me. And looking at the charts of the leaders, I could see the interaction between the leaders. I could see the chosen figures, their charts, how they mingle, and each of them was leader in times of peace and can be leader in times of war. We were talking about the spirit of the times and the figures. The sky is not a sky of peace. I think you understood that by this. And I also, at this moment, have this, just like in the spirit of the times, this fear And that fear is shared by everyone. If I look at the charts of the leaders, they know more than me about their own astrology. And I see that this is calling for being courageous. Each and every one of them can pay with their lives in 2025, in around the eclipses in March already. Okay, so different transits, different this, different that. But I understand why they would want to put AI. And so these are powerful moments where you grow with your career or with your endeavors and with your quest. And in those times, people ask themselves, why? However, this perspective to me, to my path, is very important. It's not easy, but it's also very important. And I can think about this as times where it was both downright triggering, okay, to look at what is the spirit of the skies, what is the spirit of our times, but also alleviating. Another point where astrology was fascinating to me, because I was thinking about the Ubermensch project and Aries in Aries. That's the superhuman project for you. Now, before you say Nazi, well, basically the superhuman is about living, surviving as humanity intergalactically. And I think about our vantage point. I understand that the archetype of Aries, or the archetype of Mars, is like sleeping in a warm hug and then waking up in the morning ready for the day, wanting to break through, wanting to express yourself and expressing yourself very bravely. It's the head of the baby. I have Mercury in Aries. And it is by that nourishing hug, the hug that is providing rather than okay anything other, that head of the baby comes out, that Aries archetype is preserved. It's that hug that is respectful of the sovereignty. Sovereignty is not for nothing that when Rahu went into Aries, we began to hear the sovereignty discourse rises and rises, because to get to Mars, to get to other planets, to get humanity across, we need, it's not just a strong Mars, it's a strong sovereignty. And that strong sovereignty, with all, if we take a look at military operations, whether it's MK Ultra, whether it's a gateway, whether it's all these things that they were working on eliminating the identity and making an identity malleable, sort of being who you have to be, it is actually the other way around. It is actually the embrace of the sovereignty that a strong I am is what brings the head of the baby to come out and for humanity to extend itself and bravely birth itself or to other planets as well. Is that curiosity, that bravery, that what people call impulsive, that sometimes allows the Aries to do things that nobody would think is even possible. Because it's the new, it's the innovation. And that innovation is coming from that warm hug that is not suffocating, is not confiscating, but is providing and is nourishing And that hug, to provide that hug, you provide it with when the cup is full and overflowing. That sovereignty. It's the I am. It is the I am that gets us for everywhere we go. And so the way that humanity has been going along the superhuman project to create a superhuman that can withstand this and can withstand that and can withstand that is actually beginning with the warm hug that you spring into life with. And that and when you want to sustain, okay, let's say we've been through a hardship, it is that warm hug that you come back to, you have a good night's sleep, and you go back and try something new. There's no amount of anything that can substitute for that warm hug, for the sleep, for the night of Brahma, for the sleep before the Genesis. And all of our attempts, and I see Aries ingressing into Aries in the 1920s, all of our attempts to replace that warm hug rather than to nourish it, they may have not been from malefic intentions. They may have desired us to be able to sustain without that warm hug. But just as soldiers discovered in quite those years that they cannot sustain without water for so long, and they need to have water, so the technology should be around providing water rather than sustaining without. And in that way, that warm hug, the technology is about, or the technology is also development, is about providing that warm hug in a way that is respectful for both the provider and the person who is hugged, okay, in that sense, that honors the sovereignty. It is not the ego that an abomination of the I am, or the trauma, okay, what colloquially we call torture. But basically, what the underlying meaning is to put a person through excruciating experiences to supposedly create a superhuman or super strength. It is not those things. It's not in that way in which we go about it. But it's actually through that warm hug and allowing that sovereignty to spring into where it wants to go, and then by trying and trying again and having that warm hug to return to, it's by that that we develop that superhuman. Aries in Andromeda constellation is a great time for humanity to reconcile, to understand, and to try in a new way. Because we have been doing a lot of things that are tremendous sacrifice on humanity level, that that actually is not the course of action that leads us to spring into intergalactic existence. And the problem again is not with technology, because it is with Aries. And I haven't done NASA's chart, but definitely with NATO, which is a military operation, this is where we would develop those superhumans. Right? Where Mars is, and Mars in Aries, and Ra in Aries, a strong Mars placement. And so, in that regard, with Aries being an Andromeda constellation, sign of reconciliation, It is actually um, how do we preserve for this warm hug and how do we improve for this warm hug, because the Aries constellation, the sovereignty, this is the sign of when you think about Kantian logic and the logos and the notion that let's say you are in a place where it's no church or it's no imam or it's no synagogue or it's no town's chief or there's no shaman, nothing, then within yourself with that logos you are still connected to with divine God, guidance, divine godness, and with the rationality that you know with your morality is very simple. If everybody did like what I do, would it be a world that I want to live in? Okay, it's not the entire story, but we go for simplicity because as we go for not to extinct ourselves, but rather to spring into intergalactic, okay, then simple logic, everything is simple. Think about like the baby, and it is with the Aries archetype. It's with the Aries archetype that we spring into that action, and the God in Aries is the I am. Now, the God in Aries is the I am. It's not about I am above, so not about I am below. It's the I am that is not of Lacanian. You think about Sun in Libra as a more Lacanian. You are here, so up until you, this is me. This is what I know. And it can be tremendous space between us. But you see, where you end, for the, probably where I begin, because I'm not you, okay? But there could be a lot of things between us. There could be this, there could be that, there could be space, and I would not always see that space because I have to distinguish the self and the other. This is not a Lacanian notion of the self. The I am has more to do with the sovereignty and the logos. It doesn't mean that there is no distinction for this is you, or this is a cup, or this is this, or this is that. But the focus is on the sovereignty, on the I am, on the identity. And that identity is sacred. And it's that identity that develops. So when we develops into situations, circumstances, and what we want, they become a part of the I am, yes. But it's not like we have to um, become who we need to be at the situation from a place of losing our identity and letting something that is not the I am take over. But actually by being with the I am, that we can both be supported by that hug and be brave and try things, by the way, knowing we are not alone. Because when there is an I am, the other side is Libra. When there is an I am, usually there's a partner. And that happens when there is an I am. So this is how just looking at the astrology can contribute to a perspective that I wouldn't get otherwise on a topic that if you had to discuss, I'm sorry, but all these people telling, oh, Aries is about LGBTQ. No, that's not what it is. But also if I want to discuss and I talk about the superhuman project, it's like, oh, that's Nazi. Let's talk about what is the essence of that project. A lot of people talking about, oh, there's a plan to extinguish humanity. Well, if there is Saturn Neptune conjoining, and the last time it happened was the Spanish flu. So some of it is social engineered, some of it is this, some of it is that, but some of it is the fact that Saturn is about to meet Neptune again in 0° Aries. So there are going to be all kinds of forces operating there. That transit is still going to happen. And then when the power of astrology is looking at the sky, this is what we can do. Going back to the natal chart, 1949, 2 world wars, okay, where would you put that Mars? If we want to maintain the longest peace and we want to make sure that in time of war, that Mars is going to be strong and competent to do war. Okay, to defend, to change, to innovate. And innovate is Aries. But you also, like I said, you look at the outer planets. So you have Aries is in Aries. There's nothing you can do about that. It's a home sign of Mars. But if you put that Mars in Scorpio, you don't have you're in the end of the 40s. You have only 40 years, and then you're up and running again, and it's a Scorpionic. You put that Mars where it's exalted, that's nice, but first of all, you're going to have Neptune coming in, weakening Mars, dissolving Mars. This also need to be said. Creating chemical weapons that might be used, and we have to surrender whether they're used or not. This is the nature of Neptune. And it's going to take time, because it's Saturn ruled Mars. And then you're going to have, if once Neptune's done with that, you're going to have for 2008, you're going to have another one. And then what the other home of Mars is Aries. So if you're in 1949 and you think there's a military operation, I don't want there to be a world war, but I definitely want to be prepared for one. I want to have enough time. So from the perspective of 1949, the best place to put Mars is in Aries. And then you put ruler of ascendant, ruler of this, ruler of that. By that time, unfortunately, those people eventually might be liquidated. And this is very important. So there will be transition of the old generation, usually generals or people at the head of organizations or leaders, okay? Usually the older generation that they change the face of the world, but they will, in the best of cases, retire after that. Now we can talk about there's a new world order, there's a this, there's a that, all of these things. Here there are various interests, various attempts to capitalize on this, to adapt to the spirit of the times, to all these things. And there is also a chart. So this is where astrology can be both terrifying, because we're understanding that if people were thinking about World War III, this is given more a 15-year activation. And then we will have some rest for some, okay, around 20 years. And then Pluto comes in. So what we understand is, even if we think back to 1949, do we think, oh, these people set us up? No. They chose for the best Mars that give us the most time to prepare for next time that we need to do war. And not only that, there's going to be a very protective bisextile. Now, when I say protective, the question is protective of who? And I hope that we can all tap into that bisextile with Uranus in Gemini. That's going to conjoin Sedna, which is challenging to begin with. And because Sedna asks for, it's a 1200-year cycle, and she's asking for never before seen respect. You think about Sedna in Inuit society that did not want to marry any man, and she needed a particular touch that nobody was able to provide her because women were not making most decisions. It's not for desire to oppress women, it's just that women were in the kitchen and men had to do the hunting and the taking care of everything in the building. And then women they didn't understand women that women did not decide who would they marry or when they have children. They did not have these decisions, and Sedna was privileged in that sense, and she didn't want anyone. So she was seen in a very bad way, even by her father, and then she was betrayed and was killed. And nobody understood, why doesn't she want anyone? Okay, because she came to change society, then they had to appease her to get food, so they couldn't accommodate for food and housing as a solitary woman, but then they had to appease Sedna, and she needed that special touch, the thing that basically exists in a society where women can make a decision for themselves, and also men can reject women as well. We are talking about, we are in 2025, we don't fully have the society in the world. So let's not dupe ourselves that working with Sedna is that easy. Um, and then we're going to have Pluto. Pluto is already in Aquarius, and this is another support for this bisextile. So if we had to have a gigantic activation of a military organization that is quite big, and it's going to get bigger very likely, then having a protective bisextile to support for these times is even more favored. In that sense, it's if those supposed reptilians that want to take over our world, okay, they definitely wanted to make sure that they have time, but that also means humanity has time. And by that time, Ubermensch, the Ubermensch project asteroid, which is Aries in Aries, has reached Andromeda, which is a sign of reconciliation. It is also a sign which is towards the end phase. It is the end phase of Aries, where we understand that the superhuman is actually the well-nourished Mars. And the well-nourished Mars can only be with a womb that could choose whether she wants to, yes, no, have children, but also for the man, and was provided enough so that she can give care without being suffocating. And and from that we have what the idyllic superhuman is basically um, coinciding and sextiling Sedna. It's not sextiling, but it's coinciding with Sedna, where it is not by forcibly having babies, or even necessarily technologically having them, which is not a bad idea to have the opportunity necessarily, depending on how it's done, but actually by the very basic things. As Aries is a basic sign, it's a simple sign, but with that simplicity, we can go intergalactic as existence, and we can look at very complex systems, for example, astrology, or NATO, or the Superhuman Project, and with the naivete of a childlike curiosity and the bravery of that child, and see the world from a different point of view, which is what we need if we want to be in places that are good places that we never got to in a good way, and have experiences that actually good for us. So thank you for listening.